welcome to our special meeting. We have two meetings tonight, one dealing with the refinancing of the bond, Bill 60, and then we'll go into City Council. We'll have a meeting concerning the budget amendments. Okay. Mr. Shear, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good.
From the growth? That's good. All right, I call this meeting in order. Mr. Hanlon, read Bill 60, please.
Bill 60 is an ordinance authorizing the incurrence of non-electoral indebtedness and the issuance of a series of general obligation bonds in a maximum aggregate principal amount of up to $11,500,000, providing for maximum interest rates, maximum maturity amounts, and a place of payment in respect to the bonds.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Marshall. And Ms. Bowman, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I am going to now hand over this spot to Scott Shear to go into the details of what it is that you'll be approving tonight.
And we had a little introduction a couple weeks ago, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
I just have a brief handout that's very similar to the one you saw before. Kind of one minor update.
No, that's okay. Well, maybe we'll introduce him.
Yep.
I've seen emails coming back. Hi, George.
Hi,
Welcome.
The machine didn't have staples in it. There we go. You got some here.
Okay, Mr. Shear, why don't you introduce bond counsel?
Yes, so also with me is the city bond counsel, Mr. George Magnatta from Saul Ewing. So I will kind of go over this handout briefly, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Magnatta to review the ordinance as well. So again, just to kind of recap from when I was here back earlier in the month, there's an opportunity to refinance two different bond issues of the city. And again, that's what this handout illustrates, and that's what's also incorporated in the ordinance that your bond counsel will review. Why don't we turn to page 2, just to get ourselves acclimated again. So we're looking at the Series A of 2011 bonds, about 4.7 million outstanding. They are callable or refundable April of 2017. Final maturity is 2036, and the average fixed interest rate on these bonds is just a little under 4%. We're also considering the 2012 bonds. A little over 4.1 million outstanding, call date April 2017. So again, they're both callable basically at the same time, which is why we're trying to achieve some economies of scale and doing them together. Not a lot left on this one as far as term. It fully matures in 2022, and the average rate is a little under 2.5%. And so what we'd be proposing here is going from these two issues are both traditional fixed rate bond issues. We'd be proposing going into refinancing into another traditional fixed rate bond issue. So it's got interest rates locked in, you know exactly what you're going to be paying until the final term of the transaction. And net of issuance cost right now, kind of right on the market, we've seen a lot of volatility. We're looking at all total about $350,000 of net savings, with the bulk of that occurring in 2017, roughly $300,000, and then small amounts thereafter. And you can actually see, I know it's kind of small, but in that little box up in the top right-hand corner of that page, you sort of see how the savings fall. Again, about $296,000 in the first year, and then a few grand each year thereafter. And so those savings would not be locked in. If you did pass this favorably this evening, there's still a lot of work that the team would need to do to put together the operating document that investors would be relying on. That goes through the credit rating process. So we'd probably be spending the rest of December doing all the rest of the paperwork internally, and then probably locking in the interest rate sometime in early January. Again, right now with all the volatility in the market, if you don't need the price, we recommend waiting until January when we really the main change or addition from when I was here back in early November was we had an RFP, request for proposal, out on the street to various underwriting firms that do, do good business here in Pennsylvania, understand the municipal world and PA, and ones that, we know can do a good job. So we put an RFP out based on, for them to respond with their qualifications, with their interest rates, with their commissions. And so section 2 on page 2 is just a quick summary of the proposals. PNC Capital Markets submitted, Scattergood submitted, Janney Montgomery Scott did not. Janney Montgomery Scott did. Citigroup and RBC did not respond just due to the market volatility. And so when we analyzed all the proposals that came in, PNC Capital Markets had the best proposal. So that's who we recommend the city proceed with as one of the additions to the ordinance that your bond council will go over. And then on the timeline down at the bottom, again, tonight would be the second and final reading, and then again, pricing the bonds, which is when we lock in the interest rates, lock in the final savings, would occur sometime probably in early January, and then we'd settle a few weeks after that. So unless anyone has any questions, again, the rest of the handout is basically identical. Yes?
Quick question, Mr. Chair. So you're saying the average that you're giving up on session C in number 1 is the savings will be 350,000 with a buck in 2017, but that's a total savings. But you're basing it at what, 2.43% average or 3.91% versus the 2.815 that you're actually getting from PNC.
So
wouldn't the savings be a little bit higher?
So the current fixed rate for the 2011 A bonds is about a 3.91%. The current fixed rate on the 2012 bonds is about a 2.5%. So that's a good question. So if you turn to page 7. So on page 7, column 3. So these are, again, basically current interest rates if the deal would be done today. See the interest rate per maturity. So basically, and again, we're not modifying the maturity of either of those two bonds. They're still going to be maturing in the same years and have the same weighted average maturity of the way they are right now.
Just the interest are changing.
I'm sorry?
The interest are changing.
Just the interest amount will change. Actually, the interest rate will go down, therefore that's going to produce the savings.
Correct.
So we're basically going, on the 2011 A bonds, we're going from an average rate of about 3.91% down to about 2.77%. Okay, when you kind of compare the interest rates from the old bonds to the new bonds. So a pretty substantial decrease in the interest rate. For the 2012 bonds, we're dropping down from the average interest rate, like I said, of about 2.5% down to just a little over, call it about 2%. So not as much of a drop, but it still is producing economic savings, which again is why we're recommending combining the two into this one transaction, get them both done at the same time, again, save on some issuance costs so we don't come back 6 months from now or a year from now and then want to refund this other piece. It just kind of makes sense to combine them both, because they are still producing savings. It's just the 2011 A bonds are producing more of it because it's the longer of the two pieces.
So when you combine them, the average would be 2.8%, 2.81?
The new average, so if you actually go to, page 8, so on page 8, the number in the box where it says yield of the issue, 2.77%, that is based on today's interest rates. That's what's called the new arbitrage yield. That's a 2.77%. So that would be the fixed interest rate for the new combined transaction. And what we're actually also not showing, just because we're being conservative, right now the city pays what's called a paying agent fee on both of these bond issues, on the 2011 A and the 2012. That's an annual fee that's paid to the paying agent, Bank of New York Mellon. Now it's a small fee, it's about $500 a year, somewhere in that ballpark. So by combining those two deals into one deal, now you're only gonna have one of those per year. So, you know, again, it's small, it's a few $1,000s, but it's something. We're not even reflecting that in this final schedule, but that's something ultimately where there will be some additional savings realized in the city budget.
Is it, well, you don't have a minimum escrow yield, you just have a maximum escrow yield, right?
I'm sorry?
You have a maximum escrow yield, not a minimum escrow yield, so it's that.
Right, I mean, there's a certain threshold that we're not able to invest, and your bond counsel can speak more to that, in the escrow. Now, these are both very short escrows. We don't really need to worry about sort of the arbitrage aspects of this transaction because the short-term interest rates are so low, that we'd be investing in that escrow. And again, this is the current refunding, so some of that does not apply. But yeah, we're well below the maximum escrow yield.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Henry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amount that, is this, what is the cost associated with the ordinance?
So the cost, if you stay on page 8, I believe these are very similar to the ones that I shared back in the earlier in the month, so the savings that we're reflecting, that $350,000 is net of the cost of issuance.
Net of the cost, okay.
That's already net of cost. So the estimates that we have on page 8, so we have $6.50 for the underwriter's discount, and that's actually still kind of conservative. That does not reflect the bid that was received from PNC, which is actually a little bit lower, so there'll be a little benefit from there. The bond insurance, we're gonna be bidding that out. There's 2 bond insurance companies remaining in the nation, and we bid that out. But that's probably gonna come in pretty close to that. And then the other cost of issuance is, again, right now, just an estimate, which would include our fee, bond counsel fee, credit rating fee, various printing. And again, we don't have that firmed up until closer to the time that we actually price the bond. At that point, we know for the time and the hours spent enough, but it will not exceed that amount that we have there. So we always kind of start with the budget amount and then kind of at the maximum. And then as we get closer to the time we actually execute the transactions, when we fine tune the fees, and then we'll have a little bit left over, which will just result in additional savings for the city.
Okay.
But again, the key note there is the savings that we've been discussing is already net of those costs.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for my comment? Does bond counsel want to make a comment?
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. You know what, your name, full name for the record.
Yes, George Magnatus, law firm of Saul Ewing. In front of you is an ordinance that if you so choose to approve tonight, would establish parameters for the baseline that at the time when everything is ready to go would enable PNC to price bonds, and that baseline essentially establishes at least a 2% savings baseline, and authorizes, the ordinance authorizes a refunding, notes that there must be at least a 2% savings in order for the president or vice president of city council to authorize the PNC to go to market and price the bonds, and for you all to accept the bond purchase agreement, the addendum to the bond purchase agreement. There is a specified range within which the bonds have to be priced, no less than 95% of par, and no more than 125% of par. This ordinance further authorizes you all to execute the relevant documents that are necessary to be filed with the Department of Community and Economic Development, so we can get the process started. So at the time when the market is right, we can go to market and hit the market at the right time. It also authorizes the disclosure document to market the bonds, execution of all of the ancillary documents that are attendant to the financing.
Thank you. Any questions for George? Scott, just go over parts, go over the timeline, just for the.
Sure, again, the timeline would be, so if you pass it this evening, we would continue to work on the official statement, the operating document that has a lot of financial, demographic, geographic information about the city, the little document that we have to put together before we go to market. So that'll take a few more weeks to put that together. Then we'll have a credit rating phone call, that'll probably be towards the latter part of December with both rating agencies, Moody's and S&P, to hopefully get those ratings reaffirmed for the city. And then we will look to probably finalize that document or post it for the investors, probably right around the new year, and then look to actually price the transaction, which when we lock in the interest rates, and therefore lock in the savings, probably shooting for the first or second week of January. We'd like to position this such that it's out in the market very early on. And the reason behind that is typically in January, especially the first couple weeks of January, a lot of issuers are sort of slow to come to market because they're just sort of starting the process at that point in time. We want to beat that rush. So if there's less supply in the market, it means there'll be more attention to these bonds, which means it'll drive down the interest rates, which obviously help with the savings. That's our goal there. So again, we're hoping to lock in the interest rates and lock in the savings sometime around the first or second week of January.
Okay.
If we see that change materially, we of course will let you know, but that's our expectations as of right now.
You're not gonna wait till after inauguration?
Probably
It's a joke. Just a joke, sorry. All right, thank you, Scott. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. McLean.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe just for clarification here. We're gonna refinance the series, the 2011, 2012 bonds, which are indicated on page 2. And then on page 8, it shows the cost. And I understand this is estimated, but it's not an exact to the penny cost. But this will be the cost to refinance those bonds.
Yes, correct.
So we're looking at roughly 9.2 million.
The new bond issue is estimated to be roughly about 9.2 million.
Okay.
The bulk of that obviously going to about 4.8 million and change going to pay off the 2011 bonds.
Right.
And then about 4.2 million going to pay off the 2012 bonds.
Okay. And this isn't for you, but I guess it's for council president, and we're looking at an ordinance for 11.5.
Yeah, so again, I think we touched on this a little bit before. This is a parameters ordinance which has these maximum interest rates, has maximum amounts. So we just need to make sure this is the kind of the last council meeting where there's kind of a meeting of the whole and a vote. So if this is approved and then we, as my council said, it's sent to DCP for the state's approval. Once they approve it, then all the paperwork, then we can go price the transaction. As long as the final pricing comes in below the interest rates, comes in below the maximum amount, there's no further board action. So this is probably how nowadays, I'd say 90% of the issuers do these transactions. And the city's entertained these parameters ordinances in the past as well, over the past 5 or 6 years or so. And it basically just gives the financing team more flexibility to enter the market at the right time. But to be very clear, the purpose of this issue is solely just for the refunding of those 2 transactions. There's no new money thrown into it, no new money at all. So the only purpose is to refund the 2012, the 2011A, and to pay the cost of issuance, period.
And one more quick question, having that clarified, because I understand that 2.5 million is, for lack of a better words, a buffer.
Yes.
Depending on the market, or what the costs are. And the savings then are based on we're basing those on roughly 9.2 million, a little bit more than 9.2 million, or are we basing that on the 11.5?
9.2.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Hi, you're welcome. Any other comments from my colleagues? For George or Scott? I'll open it up to the public. Welcome, Mr. Hirschman.
Thank you, Mr. President.
How are you, sir?
So far, good.
Good.
And the chief over there raised a good question about the buffer, 11.5. If we only need 9.2, why do we have to put that buffer in there? That means we put the buffer in there and the crosswalk, that means there's no savings.
Okay,
Yeah, so I guess the first, maybe to address the first point, there's a legal threshold in the ordinance that we cannot execute the transaction unless the net savings are greater than 2% of what we're refunding. So if we see interest rates go up, and we go below that threshold, we cannot do the transaction. At that point, we have to come back to city council and say, well, we're now below the threshold, whether we wait 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, to be determined on the market, but there are certain parameters in there that we cannot proceed unless we meet that threshold.
Okay, thank you. Very good question.
once in my life.
Thank you, Mr. Hirschman. Johnson, welcome also.
Good evening, Glenn Winsecker. There's a lot of bonds being floated around here for years. It's amazing. What's the major purpose of doing this other than, I know he said it's gonna be some just for refinancing. I don't understand losing this money, but what's the principal amount of payment we're gonna make in 2016 to these two bonds? Because these are fixed and we're gonna make principal payments to the people that own these, right? Do they have an idea what that's gonna be this year?
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
For 2016 or 2017?
16.
It's
For 2016.
Yeah.
You're gonna make payments in 16,
Well,
correct?
so they've already been made. Those payments in 2016 have already been made.
When do they normally make? January and July, or
They are made in April and October.
April and October? So basically that added to the principal that I think you're gonna, you're gonna pull that principal out of these two bonds, is that correct or not?
Well, those two bonds will be defeased, they will be taken off the market, they will no longer exist, and these new bonds will they will replace those.
Now, when I first looked at this, maybe I'm looking at the right bond, but I'm not sure. There was about $2.5 million of principal that were in these two bonds. Is that a number that sounds to you people, or what? That would be, in other words, we paid down these two bonds about $2.5 million in the last so many years that these bonds are in effect. Now, that money is gonna be brought back into the city. It's into the city now. But if you're gonna take these bonds and extend them the same amount of years to 2035 or 36, I mean, there has to be, you have to pay for this again.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding if you could try that question again, I'm not sure I understand.
I'm trying to see where the value of the principal that we paid already for these bonds, what happens to that?
Well, so so the principal has already been paid on the 2011A and 2012. That principal has been paid, which now allows for this refunding to be at a lower amount. Right? So the principal has been paid, which means you won't have to issue as much to refund the bonds, which is reflected in these schedules.
Okay. When is the first payment due on these new bonds? If you do this in January, the first payment would be when?
First payment will be April of next year.
April of 17?
Yes. So the current payments for both those transactions are in April and October, and the new payment dates for the new transaction will be April and October.
And when you use the word savings, that's only because it's for the 1 year only, because you're pushing out the payment to April or something, is that?
No, we're not pushing out the payment. The savings are truly a result of going from a higher rate to a lower rate, and therefore that's reducing the interest expense, which is realized through a reduced debt service payment in 2017.
Well, I don't have a good handle on you said 2.5%, where one bond was 2.5%, the other one was maybe, what, 3 something, and you say you're gonna get new bonds for around 2.77 or something like that? Is that right?
Mr. Hodgson, go ahead.
It might come in handy, and I don't think he has a copy of what Scott has provided him, but on page 7 in the document, you will see laid out over 20 years.
We don't have that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I probably should have somebody show it to you. So you-
Let's go, Mr.
There you go. Council President. on page 7 on that document, you will notice, I'm looking particularly at column 6 and 7 on that page for those of you who have the whole package. You can see under column 6, column 7, what the expected debt service of this debt issuance was going to be if we stayed with what we currently have, which over a course to 2036 is close to $11.3 million. We make a savings, though, in 2017 by doing this that is nearly $300,000, and then we get incremental savings of about another $50,000 for the remaining period, which does not extend beyond what we were planning on doing. This is you see some principal is going to decrease in about 2023 because one of these two previous issues was going to run or was going to mature in about 2022. The rest of it was going to mature in 2036. So the bulk of that is getting paid off in principal off the get-go, and we maintain the exact same schedule to pay this off with an overall savings of $350,000 over 30 years.
Okay, one more question. Did you look at any other bond scenarios that the city currently has that are fixed that you could do the same thing with?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
And which were those bonds?
Well, we always look at all the different bonds outstanding for the city and what would make economic sense to proceed with, and it's just these two transactions that are either legally able to be refinanced now or producing any kind of benefit.
So to answer my question, you did look at other bonds, but this was the best scenario to do. And how many other bonds can we do this to in future years, in your opinion?
Well, the city has currently right now 8, let's see, you got 12 different series of
Page 3 of your documents, by the way.
So, yeah, most of which have various call dates or different redemption provisions. So, yeah, I mean, again, it's something that we're always looking at, depending on market conditions, if it makes sense or not.
Do you foresee something in a year or so to do this again? Because that's what I'm getting at.
No.
No?
No, we don't. No, I mean, basically, the next real bite at the apple will be probably in 2023. It's definitely gonna be a few years away. I mean, that's the call date of the 2015 bonds, which really are the ones that have kind of the most potential for refinancing in the future. Thank you.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Grady.
Just, Mr. Hunter, you've been here pretty often, and we've done a lot of these bonds like this to try to refinance it. But by law, there has to be a savings whenever we do it. Right, Scott? We can't just refinance to refinance. There has to be a savings.
You could technically do it. You could legally do a restructuring of the debt where you would have this savings, but that's not what this transaction is at all.
But I'm saying, whenever we do a restructuring of a bond, we always get a savings of the bond, of the money, if we do it this way.
Yeah, I mean, the past bunch of transactions that we've done have, they've been the traditional refundings, like what we're contemplating here.
Yeah.
That's correct.
I don't think we ever done one, since I've been here, that is to lose money. We always done it to actually save money.
Well, we're in the wrong business if we want to do it to lose money.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Then you better go down to the sands, I guess.
Well, that kind of answers your own question, then. You answered your own question.
Okay. Anyone else from the public? Okay, thank you, Mr. Shear. Thank you, George. And Ms. Hartzell, Ms. Bowman, and Mr. Hanlon.
Minor amendment here.
Okay, the minor amendment is,
Minor amendment is to insert in the 4th line of the 8th whereas the bond underwriter, and that would be PNC Capital Markets LLC. Do we do it by common consent?
by common consent for the amendment? So moved. Okay, now, Mr. Hanlon, we could vote on the bill.
Bill's up as amended. Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Reedy?
Yes.
Hendricks?
Yes.
McLean?
Yes.
McGuire?
Yes.
Rhoda?
Yes.
And Mr. O'Connell?
Yes.
I have 7 years.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Thank you, George. Have a good evening. We'll move right on to ordinances for introduction. Mr. Hanlon, Bill 80.
Bill 80 is an ordinance to the City of Allentown that adopts the Capital Projects Fund budget for 2017.
Thank you, sir. Do I have comments from my colleagues on Bill 80? Seeing none. Do I have comments from the public on Bill 80? Seeing none. I will assign this to Committee of the Whole for the future. Hey, Mr. Hammond? Let's go to Bill 81.
Bill 81 is an ordinance of the City of Allentown that adopts the grant fund budget for 2017.
Thank you, sir. Comments from my colleagues about Bill 81? Seeing none. Comments from the public, Bill 81? Seeing none. We will sign this for Committee of the Whole for a future week or so. This meeting is adjourned. We will go right into, I will call this meeting to order. First meeting is adjourned. I will call this meeting to order. We will go right into our City Council meeting concerning the budget and budget amendments. At this point, I will make a motion as President of City Council to suspend the rules and procedural rules found in council relating to budget amendments and make amendments to the respective budget bills that have been introduced and under review relating to the general fund and the capital plan resolution. I need a second.
Second. I'll second.
By common consent, after that, so moved, we are moving forward. Okay, Mr. Hanlon. Budget amendments to the general fund. Mr. Hanlon, I want you to read each budget amendment and specify exactly what is being done with that budget amendment.
Okay, so this meeting was part of the other meeting, wasn't it?
Well, I like to kind of separate them because
Okay. All right.
we're saving money there and, well,
Okay.
whatever. Go ahead.
All right, so the first amendment is to budget the following salaries for each position at $1. And those positions are the managing director, the community and economic development director, and the operations manager. A 10% across the board cut in the premium pay account, and that will result in savings of $350,583. A 10% cut in the account 46 line item by 10%, and that will result in a savings of $586,414. Place $60,000 in council's account 46 for a compensation benefit analysis that would create a pay grade schedule, review reclassifications and internal procedures to create a merit-based personnel code. Delete the non-bargaining wage range in the budget book. The salaries will be what is budgeted. The intent of council is that these are the annual budgeted salaries that cannot be increased except by ordinance. Establish a 1.5% increase for all non-bargaining workers. So you would roll back every increase contained in the proposed budget above and beyond 1.5%. That was granted to most of the non-bargaining positions, and that includes rolling back all classification and other changes that are suggested in budget memo 5. And these pay structures will be addressed in the future after an appropriate citywide study. The exceptions are with the police chief, the assistant chief, and the captains. They will receive a 3% increase above last year's wages to be commensurate with the union increases. The fire chief will receive a 2% increase based on last year's salary, and that will be commensurate with the respective bargaining units. Add $50,000 to council budget account 46 for potential legal assistance in the event of a conflict. Place $2,500 in council's budget account 46. This will go to appropriate agency for teaching English. Place $5,000 in council's budget account 46 for cultural events. And place another $5,000 in account 46 for arts and cultural events. Do a 10% reduction in the EIT increase. That would result in a $610,000 savings and reduce the EIT increase accordingly. And finally, to add to the capital projects in the 2018 budgets, this will have no budgetary effect. This would add $250,000 for permanent toilet facilities at the Fountain Park between the soccer and baseball fields.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for reading those amendments and the explanation for each amendment. I will now open up the discussion to my colleagues about the amendments. Do I have any discussion, comments about the amendments from my colleagues? Seeing none, I will now open the budget amendments to the public.
Ken Evans, 2.2 North St. Cloud. The first one that you mentioned, there's a couple positions at $1. Does that mean we're eliminating these positions period, or?
I will defer to council.
That's not an elimination of the positions, it's a reduction.
Well, I'm paying $1.
Well, it,
I was just, I'm like, there's not much of a position there.
no, it's good.
No, it's in the budget for $1.
I assume those are in as placeholders,
Yes.
then there's no elimination.
Any other? Yes, sir.
That must be an answer, really.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. One of the things I seen, you were just reading off, there was money put aside for a toilet facility at Fountain Park. I was wondering if consideration would be given to a toilet facility also out at the credit union or the barn, Christmas barn out there. We now have two toilets out there, basically Johnny's, that are there year after year. I think that's another area that could be worked on as far as either to the Drexler Fund or someplace to look into. And if it doesn't get in this year, it should really be considered for next year.
Okay, we can look into that. Yes, sir, Ms. Monsignor. Any other comments from the public? Welcome, Ms. Lemon.
I think what you're doing is great.
Name and address for the record.
Betsy Lemon, 1852 Chu Street.
Go ahead.
I don't need to say anymore. I think you guys are on the right track. As a taxpayer and a retiree, yay.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Pearson.
Dennis Pearson, 942 East Toombs Street. If you speak about toilet facilities,
You really not, I gave some leeway, I gave some leeway to Mr. Hunsinger, and I guess in all fairness, I'll give leeway to you, but we talked about Fountain Park, but go ahead, you finish your comments.
there are two places at the pool, at the Urban Pool, that have been closed for many years, and they use Job Johnnies there too.
Understood, understood. Anybody else for restroom facilities? I'm sorry. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, Mr. Hanlon, call a vote on all of the budget amendments that were presented and proposed this evening. Mr. Hanlon.
Okay, all the budget amendments, Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Mr. McGuire.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa.
No.
Mr. President, I have 6 yeas and 1 nay. Passed.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much and have a good evening.